Hi, welcome back. In the last video, we spoke about why you should pick Australia over the USA. In this video, we are going to give you the reasons why we believe you should pick the USA over Australia.
Remember, we've only spent 2 weeks in Australia, so it's not going to be an accurate representation, and we've been living here just over 3 years now. And we spent 35 years living in the UK. So that's where we're coming from, and this will colour our perspective on things.
And what's really interesting is since we put out the videos on Australia and lots of people saw our reaction and how much we genuinely enjoyed it, we had a lot of our viewers saying, oh no, we've thrown them off now. They don't know where to go, whether they should pick America or Australia now. And this is really to help them decide, especially if you're coming from the UK, it's very normal to think about, do I go to Australia or do I go to the USA?
Reason number one, and the main reason I think most people, if they can get to the US, come to the US, and that is earnings potential. The sky's the limit and beyond really here. You have so many people that come from nothing and become billionaires. You have so many people that come from nothing and become millionaires. You have so many people that come from nothing and earn hundreds of thousands a year. This is all comparative to other parts of the world. It's not to say that everybody can do it. It's to say that it's far more difficult to earn 200,000 in the UK than it is here. A lot of our friends here earn well in excess of that. And in the UK, we didn't know a single person.
We've mentioned this a lot in other videos. We had no appreciation until we moved here, just how normal it was to earn that type of salary. And the same people with the same professional background, education, their equivalent here in the USA was living a very different life, earning so much more and just a better quality of life overall. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to talk about, yeah, but there's the complete opposite. We understand that, but we're talking from a perspective of those that are looking for that potential. And that's what we're saying here. You have that potential in the USA, whereas in the UK, you don't.
This is about people that are living in one place, thinking about moving to another place. The tax system here is super friendly to people making money, in particular if you earn money via assets, to the point where if you're a married couple, you get effectively a doubling in most tax brackets of your earnings before you're in the next tax bracket, alongside the fact that if you make money via stocks and shares or property, there's a lot of legitimate ways to write off your income. So it's not uncommon that you'll make 300,000 or 400,000 whilst paying 20% in tax as your effective rate. And as we know, for people in the UK, if you make over 50,000, every pound or penny made over 50,000 is taxed at 40%. Then you go into the 45% tax bracket. So it's not just the earnings, but how little you get taxed here.
And it was a funny thing when we moved here. I did not like how you have to file your taxes here, because in the UK it seems so simple. It's simple because they throw you all into one bucket basically, and you're all penalised, whereas here you can really leverage the system. So Anne loved the system here.
I still love it.
And I definitely see the benefits here because you really can maximize the tax system to how you're living. Next is freedom of political choice. Now, one of the biggest things that we hear all the time about living in the USA is just what the politics is like. And yes, politics is a huge part of the USA. I would argue though, where is politics not?
Yeah, politicians run countries, you're right.
Therefore, I honestly, now living in the USA, I don't really see the big difference with living in the UK. Having gone to Australia for a bit, I can actually see how politics is very... It's a
watching
huge,
their news in the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's part of every country. But I get that people seem to dislike what they believe is going on in terms of the politics here in the USA. What I would say is that you get the freedom of political area that you're in, the state, down to the city as well.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about, oh, this is a red state or a blue state. Some states can be one way, but you can find a pocket within that state. And something for us is we live in Las Vegas, which lots of people have opinions about, by the way. It's very politically...
Neutral?
Neutral, yeah, is the best way to say it. I do not live here feeling that it's one way or the other at all. I don't often get into conversations about politics with people here, and that's something we personally really like.
Next up is weather, scenery, landscape. We have heard people say how varied and amazing Australia is. Some people think the same about England. And personally, I do actually like the landscape of England and the UK. I love forested areas. I just don't like the rain. No place on earth that we've been to compares to the variety and expanse and accessibility that the US has. So although some places like Australia, I'm sure that if you go to the middle of it, it's, I don't know, desert and very extreme, but is there anything really there? Is it that accessible, or do you have to go on a pilgrimage to that area and then go somewhere else? You can go from Alaska, which is actually quite close to Russia, which is freezing cold and snowy and icy and all of those things, to the tropics of Florida and the Florida Keys, which is pretty much the Caribbean, or Caribbean, as the Americans say at that point, and everything in between.
One of the things I absolutely love about the USA is the choice in the weather, landscape and scenery to what you want at that point in time. At the moment, we love what we get in Las Vegas, but we might get bored of the extreme heat. We also might get bored of seeing the beautiful mountains every day, and we might want greenery. We might want all 4 seasons, and you have that choice here. I've known people from my work that have literally moved based on what they want in terms of their environment and scenery. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. All these places that we're mentioning, which seem super nice, like the tropical areas, the skiing places, the mountains, I bet that comes with a price tag.
Most of them do.
They do. And that's normal, because in typical places, even if you think about the UK, and I'm sure we love Sydney in Australia, that comes with a price tag of living there. Absolutely beautiful, but you have to pay for it. And yes, that is true to a degree. However, there are many places that you can live in America that still have incredible scenery with a fraction of the cost, and you can truly pick a place based on your financial circumstance.
Next is food choices. There's so many parts about living in the US that you begin to see as a US person might how others look in, and there's this real thing to make the US something that it isn't, because people just don't want to accept it has good stuff, healthcare being one of them, which we'll come on to, and food for some reason, in particular Las Vegas. So I think we've mentioned this in a few videos and people are just like, no, that's not true.
It's just not possible.
We lived in the UK for 35 years. Fair enough, we only spent 2 weeks in Sydney and Melbourne. We are food people, and we ate out usually every day. Usually 2 or 3 times a day. So we got to experience quite a wide range of the food offering, and it is exceptional. However, the amount of choice is not even close to what there is in Las Vegas.
It really isn't. And it is big. And I know what people are trying to say. You can literally get every cuisine. Every single one that you have in Melbourne, we have here, plus more. And I know it's hard for people to get their head around, but this is one of the great things about the USA. It is food choice, and you can pick a city that has incredible food, lots of choices, despite everyone just believing that all we have here are fast food joints and hamburgers.
I think one of the things that's missing for a lot of people is there's a lot of stuff that's in the news, rightfully so in a lot of cases, about the US and immigration and race and whatever, but they forget that it is actually, I don't know if it is the most diverse country on earth, but it is so unbelievably diverse. With that comes all of the people that bring their cuisines and foods. So just by the fact that it is that diverse should let people know that we're going to have a diverse range of food. There are more people here and more diverse people here than there are in places like Australia, particularly Melbourne and Sydney, which is where most people go. Yes, those are diverse cities, but it's nowhere near as diverse as the US as a whole.
I'm going to add a layer to that, the authenticity of the food, because
first gen people making food.
And I know, and actually I would say in Melbourne we got that. It was very authentic food. But in the UK you don't really get that. You get an English version.
You have to travel to specific areas
and be in the know of where to go. Whereas here it's very normal for the food, if you're having Mexican, if you're having Korean, to be authentic. Our last point about picking America over Australia is its proximity to the UK. This is a big one, because when we was in Australia, albeit for 2 weeks, we really felt detached from the rest of the world. And I've never really been anywhere before. We've traveled a lot, but it was this sense that you were living in a different world, different time zone, very detached from your family. I think that being a day ahead of them as well was a factor. And just being able to find time to work out when I could speak to them. But also the other thing that I started to think about is if something happened at home and we had to go back, it is a whole thing to try and work out to get back there, because you're looking at a whole day of travel at least.
Minimum.
We're on the west coast of the USA. It's a 10-hour flight. It's not that hard if something was to happen for us to book a flight and know that we're going to be back home tomorrow. Whereas with Australia, I really did feel that sense of it's a whole thing. And with that, it comes when family and friends are coming to visit you. It's a lot easier. America's a lot easier for them to come to. It's a lot easier for them to say, oh, I'll just come over for a week, spend a few days. Whereas with Australia, people have to consider the time. Oh, then I have to do at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks to come out there. Then it becomes a whole expense. Very, very different.
Although not as impactful to the individuals moving there, more so to their interactions with their family. And I had the same thing. It felt like we were just in a different, you may as well have been on a different planet. It felt so removed in a way that no other place has felt. So in summary, the US provides choice. That's what I feel it has over most places that we've been to. But in this case, the UK and Australia, I think it just offers a wider range of choice.
Not to say that Australia does not have choice, just to be clear. It's just breadth of choice. Whether it's what you can do financially, the place that you live, the food, the types of home, everything. America is the place for choice.
Bonus point. This is another one of these, despite what you may think, moments. Healthcare. Obviously a very complex thing in all countries. Australia and the UK seemingly make it a little bit more simple. We really don't know enough about the Australian system, so this is more focused on what we know of the UK system. If you work, you pay taxes and national insurance. Those go towards a pot, which is your contribution into healthcare. Despite what people think, healthcare is not free anywhere. It costs somebody something. In the UK, we go for the option of, if you're working, you contribute over your lifetime via your taxes. Australia, I don't know exactly how it works. Do you know? Has it come out of your tax system?
I think it comes out of the tax system, so it's very similar, but I do think how it works is slightly different.
Okay, so what people think here is, it's not fair that people have to pay for healthcare. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting start point, considering we had to pay for healthcare in the UK. It's just done in a different way. One is an optional system, the US, and one is one that you're forced. Another thing that people don't necessarily understand, particularly US people, is your contribution is a fixed factor or ratio of your income. Our contributions as a couple equates to about £14,000 per year. That was our contribution. We know this because at the end of the year, you can log on online to hmrc.gov, and it gives you a proper breakdown that tells you this is how much of your money went to the NHS.
Yeah.
So here we pay about $280 to $300 per month for our healthcare, dental, and vision. The reason for this is, if you are, depending on how you're employed, will determine how much you're going to pay effectively. Because of your employment, most of it is subsidized. And for the majority of people, we would imagine, unless you run your own business, your insurance, if you're choosing to move here, will be subsidized by your company. They'll give you some choices over what options you want. We picked one option the first year or two we were here, and then we switched to a new. So we're paying about $300. How does that look in practice? Well, in practice, if you don't visit anybody, you pay your $300 per month.
And that's it.
And that's it. We have both used the healthcare system for various things. I've had various injuries from jiu-jitsu. You've had allergies and various other things. What happens when you arrive, sometimes it's entirely free. Sometimes you have to pay a copay. Those copays can range from $10 to $100 per visit, per instance, per incident. So it will vary depending on the year. If you utilize the system more or less, it can go up and down. We've probably averaged about $5,000 per year for the 3 years that we've been here. Remember, we are paying £14,000 per year in the UK, and we now pay $5,000. So this is just to stress that it is individual, but it isn't this thing of, oh, it's outrageously expensive, nobody gets good healthcare. And to point out also, our NHS experience, particularly mine, was terrible. My experience here has been outstanding, and this is considered a poor state in terms of its healthcare, which is shocking to me because it's 10 times what I got in the NHS.
And the reason we're pointing this out was because in the last video, we didn't comment on healthcare being one of the factors why you would pick Australia over the USA. And we didn't because we don't know what healthcare is like in Australia. But what we do know is what healthcare is like for us coming from the UK and having that experience and what the USA is. What I would say to anyone that's considering moving to either or, do not let healthcare be of a true concern, because having been here for 3.5 years, it is not the picture that everyone makes out to be. I would also add to what Ant says, we actually pay a insurance towards, in my taxes, there will be insurance paid for
Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes. But despite what people think, the healthcare here is not as bad as what media, movies, I don't know what people, and yes, people might have had a bad experience, but as Ant has said, he has had a bad experience with the NHS in the UK. What we're trying to get across is typically you'll get insurance subsidised by your employer, but also if you can't afford healthcare, there are insurances, there are programs to support people for that here as well.
This is not a healthcare video, it's just because people were really pushing the fact that we didn't talk about healthcare as if it was going to be a revelation that once we reveal how bad it is in the US, you'll definitely move to Australia. So in summary, on the healthcare part, if you think across the points that we've made, more than likely, if you're thinking about a move to the US or Australia, you've probably got a set of skills or a profession that people want. You're probably, if you pick the US, going to be paid considerably more than you're paid in the UK. So your earnings are higher. You're probably going to pay considerably less in the US, particularly if you're married. We don't have a marriage break in the UK. You do here. You effectively double your salary before you get, yeah, exactly. So that's two critical points. So even if your medical insurance isn't as cheap as ours, 300, let's say you have a family of 5 and it's cost you 600, because it is dependent on how many people, the increase in your salary would cover that extra bit. The decrease in your taxes would cover that extra bit. So you're going to end up financially better off, even if you have some medical incidents throughout the year.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video on why you should pick the USA over Australia. Again, as we constantly say, this is from our perspective. We've been here for 3.5 years now, lived in the UK for most of our lives, and only spent a couple of weeks in Australia. But there are lots of redeeming factors of why you should pick America. But also, Australia is a genuinely good place in its own right. We have another video, so if you haven't watched that, watch that video. Let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.